Wabarakatuh. Very good afternoon to all. Welcome to CASIS Scholarly Dialogue. Normally we have this dialogue in a smaller circle, but given the stature of the man today and the stature of the chairman that's going chairing the session today, we felt obliged to open it up to the bigger, wider public because of the subject matter and also what our guest speaker today has been doing, and that is one of the thing that he's most known for presently is the 1001 inventions that has been traveling around the world. It has touched base here too, I think. CASIS Scholarly Dialogue is a regular meeting that we have. It is not scheduled regularly, but it's meaning it does not have a set time frame, but we do have on and off when we have senior scholars who come visiting CASIS. The next one we're going to have is on the 31st of March, and that will be with Dr. Yilmaz. Dr. Ehsan Yilmaz is a columnist for an English newspaper in Istanbul. You will be getting the announcement of that in our Facebook or our other means of advertisement. Before we begin, and before I leave the floor to the chairman, Dr. Tengku Azman, in interest of time, let us all begin with Surah Al-Fatiha all together. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Just a short note. CASIS and UTM first met Dr. Salim in our inaugural, I think it was inaugural Ditchley Roundtable Conference in Oxford 2012. And there we had the first time meeting with him, and we wanted to bring him. And alhamdulillah, this year, by the goodwill of Dr. Tengku Azman, wrote a short email, and I said to Professor Azman, we cannot miss this opportunity. So Dr. Tengku Azman is a close associate to Dr. Salim, therefore CASIS felt honored to have him introduce our guest today and chair the session. Thank you, Dato.
Thank you, Brother Zaini. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. One my good friend, Brother Zaini, of course, all the staff, colleagues. Another good friend, Brother Zaini, my senior, Tuan Said. Recognize him on the study. School days, senior. Alhamdulillah, CASIS has accepted this opportunity. Dr. Salim comes from the Foundation for Science, Technology and Civilization. And when you compare the two names, the two titles, they are almost the same. And better still, when you look at the objective, the mission, I would claim 80% overlap. If you follow the Pareto principle, 80% overlap is practically the same thing. We are one and the same. So that was why when Dr. Salim said he wanted to come to Malaysia, after a long trip, by the way, through Dubai, through Brunei, through Penang, and now Kuala Lumpur, he's actually quite tired, but still, I think we should impose upon him to share his experience. So this afternoon, I thought he should share with us his experience on creating, establishing the foundation from scratch in a non-Muslim country, specifically in Manchester, and then creating its offshoots. One just mentioned by Zaini, 1001 inventions. It's only one. There's also Muslim Heritage, which is a big website. If you go into it, you find thousands of interesting articles and links to what Muslims have done over the past eras. But today, I think we should be conscious of the crisis that we are facing. The number one crisis is actually a crisis of knowledge, which is well established and well understood, at least in CASIS, because of, I would say, the antecedent work of Professor Said And then, of course, continued by our colleagues right here, very commendable effort, I would say. It should be continued and even strengthened. That's one crisis. The cosmological doctrines of the Islamic tradition are being lost and corrupted. That's only one crisis. The other crisis I think we should mention here is the geopolitical crisis, which is actually killing Muslims everywhere and actually putting Muslims into a very defensive position, reacting to what other people say about them. I think it is time that we actually reposition ourselves to speak out for what we really stand for. Instead of being framed, I call it we are being framed by others who do not have an understanding of what Muslims stand for and yet want to speak about us. So this is, I think, what we want to hear in this discussion. It need not be introduced even by my good friend Prof. Salim, but you are most welcome to raise all these issues so that we can together try to confront them and resolve them in our own way. A little bit of background. We have known each other since 1967. If I look at your faces, some of you were not born in 1967. You are the new generation who will take over from us, and rightly so. And Professor Salim is very keen to engage with you young people so that he can pass the baton to the new group that will take over from what's going out of this world soon. At that time, I was an undergraduate. He was already a postgraduate student, by the way, at that time.
It's showing my age.
In his past life, actually, I can tell you his specialty is controlled explosions. Controlled explosions. Explosions can be controlled, by the way, and he's a specialist in that. And you know where he used this technology to actually dismantle worthless oil rigs in the North Sea, among others. So you can actually take up these oil rigs through controlled explosions. But of course, that was the old life. His new life is actually this, which is actually a new life that is bringing, I think, life to other people. Because beyond his mechanical engineering background, he has actually cultivated a deep interest in the foundations of science and technology in the Islamic world. So with that, I welcome with great pleasure Professor Salim.
Well, alhamdulillah, I'm here. I'm surprised that because I asked for only a small group. I just wanted to come to learn actually about what's been happening in Malaysia. The main purpose of my visit is to visit Azman. Because you know, when you develop friendship and brotherhood for the sake of Allah only, that means there's no business between you, no ego, no money, nothing, except the fact that we share the same faith, same aspirations. And we were a group of people like that. And this group, subhanAllah, has stayed like this. We have people from Nigeria, from Turkey, far in the world. And it shows you that if there is a sincere, loyal effort, not for worldly gain, there will be an atmosphere of barakah. And this continues. So, you know, travel across the mountains and the oceans to come and see Azman. But you see, he's very clever. He says there is a visa fee. Yeah? You have to come and talk to I said, please, I don't want a public meeting because I think I'm at a stage I want to find out how other people think, especially in your wonderful country. And also maybe we find some synergy between what we are doing and some others who are doing maybe the same, and we share the same aspirations. Maybe we can work on the same space. So this is the purpose I'm here. So I'm not here really to lecture and to tell you. I like to also hear from you. But because Azman has alluded to the years and age, some people say, when did you arrive in the UK? I say, have you heard of Prophet Noah? So you know when his ship went by? He was passenger also. Yeah, so age really doesn't matter. The important thing is the spirit and the number of challenges you meet in life. That is how you measure your age. What contributions you make on this earth. How much impact you have made on this planet. How many lives you have been able to serve and improve. How much improvement of the quality of life in people. That's really what counts. Otherwise, what's the difference between one and an animal? Right? Human beings are created for a purpose. And the most happiest person, man or woman, are the ones who actually recognize why they were created at the time and the space where they are. Right? That is not easy to achieve. When you do that, then you are completely transformed. Right? You'll find that your life becomes transformed. It becomes different. You know, you're resonating with the sunnah, the natural forces on this planet. Right? It doesn't matter about age, time, space, and so on. So this is a state that I advise my colleagues, especially the young ones, to try to. Now, how did I come to know about this? I'll tell you a little story. Well, first, let me just sort of get back to this 1001 inventions that you're all impressed about. So that's fine. It's one of our instruments and one of our tools, which has been very successful, alhamdulillah. How did it all start? Well, it was very simple. There was a guy who, let me just sort of show you just a bunch of slides all together. There's no time. I don't want to sort of. You'll find some of these slides here. A book, another edition. There is one for children also that has come out of this book, which is also published by National Geographic, and that schools can use. And it's big size, so that you cut the pages, you tear them, and you stick them on the wall, and schools can use that as a poster, because they cannot copy it. There's a copyright. So the trick is, you use the same page, you're not copying it, but you use it as a poster. They didn't know why I insisted it should be large. Anyway, so it's been around the world, everywhere, and kings, and prime ministers, and others, and so on. But the guy here, this guy, Donald Cardwell, he was a professor of history of science and technology in UNIST, and he used to take pride that his department and his faculty deals with scientists converted to historians, rather than the other way around. Because he thinks that history of science, history of technology, would be understood better if it was done by scientists and technologists. And of course, this is something that is highly resisted by historians. Historians will not accept that, right? They say you can't have scientists. You have to be a historian, being trained through historiography, the principles of how to look at history and how you investigate and so on. So there is a problem. He took this step. So one day he saw me. He said, "Look here, Salim, what are you going to do with yourself?" Now at that time, I was doing very well actually. What Azman said, I was using highly focused explosive energy, which is actually not to cut but to crack. It's not brutal force. It's you create a certain vibration which will guide a crack. Because if you have a crack somewhere and you have a tensile field ahead of the crack, then actually the crack can move. So you don't have to stretch the whole thing. you just stretch locally. So you don't need the whole energy to stretch everything, right? And it's the same thing, by the way, in social engineering. You don't have to actually, you don't have to stress the whole society to make a change. It's small change. And this focused energy of tension can get the crack to move, and you can actually move that space around. So if it was around the tube, you can zip a whole tube, maybe 1 meter diameter. It may take 100 tons of explosives to actually do that. Well, you can do it with maybe a couple of kilos. That is the challenge, and that was really something that was very interesting, exciting. So I made a lot of money that way, because I brought money to the university, and when they used to do the graph, nowadays, market forces have invaded universities, right? Actually, I call it market forces have raped the university. Because you've got to have to bring in money. You even treat the students as clients. It's just an absolute chaos. Anyway, so and when they used to graph each member of staff, you have to. So what they used to do is they put a graph of how much money each member of staff, how much publications, and so on. And alhamdulillah, somehow this orphan. By the way, I was brought up as an orphan. I had nothing. I had to sell in a small circular tray. I used to sell a bit of needles and sewing cotton wool, right? Threads, and a bit of soap. And I, from 7 years of age, and I had to do my school homework while I am sitting in the souk, in the bazaar, waiting for people to buy. So that life was very hard, because I you can't be orphan and proud at the same time, because I could not take money from my uncles, the brothers of my mother. I had to earn my own money and bring to my mother, and so that was a hard life. And there's this orphan, right? It was all the way. So when you go and do this graph in the university, they have all these things, and then suddenly you get this fellow. It's a huge point right at the top. And they say, what's this? He said, I just forget that that's al-Hassani. So that's how it became, alhamdulillah. I'm not saying this to exercise muscles and so on. In terms of publications, in terms of number of PhD students, the number of technicians that were working for me, the postdoctorals, and so on. And also I had 2 companies running at the same time, 2 consulting companies. So this guy comes to me. He says, what are you going to do with yourself? I said, what do you mean? He said, well, look, you've done so well in your life, and you are at the peak, you have all this money and all this reputation. What are you going to do with this? I said, come on, tell me, what do you want? He said, look, I have been spending my life looking at history of science and history of engineering and technology. And I find there's about 1,000 years gap missing. We look at from the Renaissance to our present day, we have a lot of names, and then there's nothing. We call it Dark Ages or Medieval Ages. And then we get the Greeks, Pythagoras and Archimedes and Galen. And so there's this. I said, yeah. And then he says, well, this actually corresponds to Muslim civilization. I said, yeah. He says, you have to do something about it. I said, me do something about it? You must be crazy. I said, what? I said, I hate history. I said, look, the history that I was taught when I was in Baghdad as a young man, it was history of people killing each other. Right? Hardly any caliph or king and so on died natural death. So what do you want me to do? And also wars here and there and conflict. He says, look, what they have taught you is history of dynasties, geopolitics, and also they have taught you history of religious arguments, right? Schools of thought and so on. What you should be doing, you look at the history of science, and look at the people who have developed science, and I'll try. I will not disappoint you. I'll try to do it. So I didn't disappoint him. I promised. He said, "Why I chose you? Because we notice you. You are a disciplined Muslim, right? You do your prayers and you leave us sometimes in a strange way. Sometimes when we invite these big people come, VIPs, and you have to have red grape juice instead of red wine. And this causes a problem for us. Actually, once, I tell you, there was once a nice joke about it. We had a Brazilian, no, I think it was from Argentine, a delegation of university. And I was sitting next to our vice chancellor and others, and they bringing this red wine. They poured in a small bottle, just glasses like that. And when my turn came, this lady comes with a big jug. I say, "You big jug." She put it in front of me. These people don't this guy, what are you doing? This is alcoholic. So I told him, you know, this fellow he's a teetotaler, and he doesn't say, "This is grape juice." Anyway, so he said, "Look, you are like that, and we know you, and it's so it is you have to do something about it." I said, "Okay, look, let me just have a look." And actually, I did not disappoint him. I had to have a look. I asked some of my students to look around and so on. I found he's right. This guy is right. There's 1,000 years missing. More than 1,000 years missing. And it got me to think. So, okay, if you there was actually an interesting thing that I found. There was an interesting book. I have to sort of go to a collection of slides to so that because I'm not prepared, right? And I'm going to try to find out if I can. That's a big problem here. What it is, I'm looking for a few pages of a book at the time, which claimed to be a book which is about history of scientists and inventors. So that's the first thing you go for, isn't it? You get a book which says the people who made technology from the earliest times to the present day. And that's the first thing you go for, isn't it? It was a popular book. Okay, well, it's like a coffee table book. And you take the pages. Each scientist each inventor or scientist has 2 pages about him and his inventions. 2 pages, so you open it. I'll start with page, I don't know whether you can see this, it's page 14. So 14 and 15 are about Archimedes. And if you look at the date, it's 287 before BC. Right? So what do you expect the next page? Maybe after 200 years? 300? 400? 500? You look at this. This is what you see. So actually there was a stark evidence that there is a huge gap. This guy has, they claim to be, they are telling you the history of the world's inventions. He has chosen to neglect the Muslim civilization, the Indian civilization, Chinese civilization, you name it. He just sort of went straight away from Europe to Europe. That's it. And then after that, another jump to Leonardo da Vinci. So this is the problem, this. So in summary, we did a bit of scanning and research, looked at the textbooks in schools and textbooks of science. If you take, say, maybe I challenge you, maybe I might fail this challenge. But you look at your book of physics that you teach here at this university, or the book of chemistry, or the book of mathematics. What you do is you go page by page, pick up the names of people who are mentioned, these names, and put them at a timeline which corresponds to their the time they were born or died, their era. You'll find this. You'll find 2 things. One is that they are all European. There's no other culture represented. This is your books today, right? In physics, you go to Newton, right? And then it's done. So the other thing you find is that there is this jump. There's nothing in between. They're European, and they are. So that actually encouraged me. And I went around asking some people. started collecting some, maybe some of you might have heard me talking. So one or two of you are in the UK, I can see some of your faces. And then you might have heard me shouting about this at that time. That was the time of my education, it was a hobby that I picked up. And I used to collect stamps, because most of countries, they take a stamp and they are proud of Ibn al-Haytham, or they discover something from their heritage, from their indigenous tradition, and they try to celebrate in order to show some sort of pride that this nation has done something. So I started, and actually you find something really disastrous. Every picture that they have is so stereotypes and awful pictures of these poor scientists. They have, and they are all long beards, turban, teeth coming out, some very strange looking people. I don't know why they choose that. And most of the scientists they're talking about, like Hassan ibn al-Haytham, al-Biruni, al-Zara, all these people, they were young, nice looking, and they were dressed smartly. Why is it so? Anyway, we picked up these and then started talking to people. And we said, okay, let's form a small society. What do we call it? From the very beginning, it was, we have to think very carefully, so we had to sit down, retreat, and think long term. What is it that we want to do? Why is this? It's just to sort of show that, Professor al-Hassani knows about this. We don't need that. I've already made my impact. Already made money. Already made name. I was awarded all sorts of prizes, so that's not the purpose. It has to be something else. Anyway, so we've assembled this, what we call Foundation for Science, Technology, and Civilization. It's not just about science, it's not about technology, but it's about civilization as well. And then we set up a small website called MuslimHeritage.com. Now, how did we get to that point between what Donald Cardwell told me, right, and I started wondering about it, to the point where we decided to do something? Something has happened. Right? And that brings me to the point that I mentioned to you earlier about the inspiration and the purpose of your existence on Earth. I'm married to a Syrian lady, so I go and visit my in-laws every now and then. One of my visits, my father-in-law is a good, pious man. He wakes up at Fajr prayer and he takes me out, says, "Come on, let us go." We go to one of the mosques. He likes to show me Damascus. After the prayer, he normally chooses to go and visit, we call them Salih, Salih, good people. I'll come to the definition of Salih later on. Anyway, one day he takes me to a place where they call it Mahallatul Akrad. This is Kurdish people in Damascus, and there was a sheikh there. He is named as Mullah Ramadan al-Bouti. He is the father of this famous Dr. Said Ramadan al-Bouti, who has been recently killed. He has made his impact on a lot of people, right? But that's his father. You go there, this fellow is just a weak, frail old man sitting on the floor, leaning on a cushion. And there were some people nicely dressed like me, all these modern people. They sit down around him, they cannot sit properly because of the trousers, they cannot keep bending their knees, so you can see they're all uncomfortable moving around. So their turn, they are presenting themselves. Then the turn, my father-in-law, he started introducing me like Azma, praising me. He says, this is our son-in-law. He is from Manchester. He's a professor. So on. So you know how it is with your son-in-law. You like to be proud. So this sheikh looked at me with a piercing eye. He uttered one sentence that has really taken me above the floor and put me back into my bed. He said, إذا أردت أن تعرف مقامك فانظر أين أقامك. See, it rhymes. We're talking about status here, because my father-in-law was trying to elevate my status. So he tells me, if you want to know your maqamak, look at where he, with capital H, where Allah has located you, your maqam, your iqamat, your place. Look at where he placed you. Now, of course, this sentence, it can have an impact in various ways, depending on the people who's receiving it. For me, that was the juncture, because I realized, what am I doing in Manchester and in England and all this, and I've come all the way from Baghdad, I was born in Norfolk, what's all this life about? What is my duty? Why Allah has placed me there? You can say, oh my God, what a miserable person, I'm with the kuffar. I'm staying there, surrounded by non-Muslims, and living there with the kuffar and all this, And you may say there is a hadith of the Prophet who says, whoever stays 40 days amongst people, he becomes one of them. No, I'm not kafir. This is a problem. But at that juncture, that has resonated with my inner consciousness. And I realized that there is a mission. It's not simple that it's not by accident. This guy, Donald Cardinal, come and tells me about this. And it's not accident that I come to Damascus. It's not accident that my father-in-law takes me to this person. And, and it's not accident that this fellow is somehow inspired to tell me this. I took it that way. Maybe it was nothing else, but I took this and then went back and said, let's do something about this. Come on now. It may be that it's a difficult issue, but as far as I'm concerned, I want to do what I can. Cannot create miracle. So this is how it started. As soon as we set up this MuslimHeritage.com, there was a huge number of people who wanted to know about this and their rights. At the same time, I started trying to use these old slides, carousels. Some of you probably don't remember that because it's all IT stuff nowadays. And we used to have. I had this slideshow, and I used to give talks here and there. Donald Cardwell, he said to me, I said, look, I can't. He said, you must go and talk to the Literary and Philosophical Society of Manchester. This is the philosophical people, very important people. Most of them are geriatric professors. I said, I can't go to this. He was the president of the society at the time. I mean, now I became leading light with them, alhamdulillah. But in those days, I went there and I told them, by the way, please tell me if I'm wrong. I found this, I found this, I found that. Right? And I realized that I was like the one-eyed man amongst the blind. These people were supposed to be the upper strata of society and intellectual circles. They are not really familiar, they do not realize the contributions, some of the contributions that I have told them about. So that gave them encouragement. And then, after about a couple of years, MuslimHeritage.com started attracting, at that time, 50,000 page views a day. Page views, not hits, page views. Because a hit is, you can get hundreds of hits on one page because of the number of colors that you have and so on. So that was really a huge, encouraging situation. And then there was a demand through the discussion and feedback. People, they say that this type of information must go out to schools. It should go out to the public domain. We have to have an exhibition. We have to have books. We have to have. So we go and ask people, come on, let's write books and so on. Not many people are brave. I'm not author. I'm not historian. So set up a team, right? That's why you find in this book, I'm chief editor. Right? I'm chief editor. I am the general commander. I use slaves. These slaves are in the form of postgraduate students, postdoctoral fellows, research assistants, and members of family. And some people who were friends of mine who I had to ask and convert them into, you have to sell the idea. Because some people say, why do you want to do this? Now, 1,000 years ago, what are you going to get out of that? Okay, Hassan ibn al-Haytham, he was the father, and we discovered how people see and so on. In fact, it is a sad thing that you are telling us because we are nothing now. Well, what has this to do with our future? See? We go and look at the past. Huh? Past is gone. So one has to reflect. Does this past have anything to offer for the future? Right? That's a very important question. You can get busy intellectually and keep enjoying the history of these people. In fact, the history is so exciting, you can continue all your life without exhaustion. Fascinating history. A typical example, he takes the first university in the world was established by Fatima al-Fihri in the city of Fez, Morocco. And this lady, 23 years of age, she would be not only giving money that she inherited from her father, right? Her sister builds a mosque, she builds up an educational institution inside the mosque. And she would project manage the whole process. And she would, in the launch day, when she puts the shovel on the floor, she declares she's fasting. And she fasted every day until the whole project is finished. And of course, ladies don't fast every day. There are some days they cannot fast, right? So, but the history says she fasted every day. And the history says that it might have been 13 years. What kind of woman is this? What sort of role example can you give to our young people? So history can actually inspire people to use role models from the past to propel them for doing a better future. So that became very important. It wasn't a question of enjoying M&S. It's nice to know about history, but you actually begin to resonate with the lives of these people. You discover many of these young men and women who have dedicated their life. There was no PhD and no high salaries. In fact, some of them, like al-Hassani, he ended up in prison for 12 years in prison inside, and he is doing research, and he's writing, and so it's not about him getting. He could have become the richest person in the Muslim world at the time had he accepted to yield to the ruler of Egypt. Because you see, the story of Hassan al-Haytham, I have to tell you this about, because this year is the world is celebrating the International Year of Light. And we have partnered with the UNESCO to celebrate the International Year of Light by recognizing al-Hassan ibn al-Haytham as the father of modern optics. The world, every country around the world, is going to know about Hassan al-Haytham. Right? Now, Hassan al-Haytham, when he was in Basra in Iraq, he has said something in one of his majlis, talking in the argument. He said, I could make Egypt the richest country. He's in Iraq, and they are ruled by the Abbasites. The Fatimites of Egypt, they are loggerheads with the Abbasites at the time. So they come, these Fatimites, they apparently, when you say you are recording, yeah, people you always have been in the habit of recording and informing. There has been informants throughout history, right? So whoever of you is going to be informed, the authorities here, please be nice and be truthful when you inform. Don't add your own, interpretation. So please do record it exactly as it is. So what happened is the Egyptian secret, informants, they go and tell the Hakim bi Amrillah in Egypt, they say, this guy says he's been given an opportunity, he can make Egypt so go get him. So he sends an emissary there and they talk to him, say, come on, and they get him out into Egypt. And then he goes, he said, what is the project? He said, the project is to put a dam on the river Nile so that he can use the water around the year and so on. That's the story. So Hakim bi Amrillah was very happy about this. Thought it's going to be great. So Hassan, what does Hassan do? He says, give me a ship. He goes in the ship and he goes against the current because it has to go south. Right? And then he looks around the river Nile and he looks at the pyramids and he sees this great Abu Simbel and he sees this civilization. He sees this cultivation of the land and so many villages around. He says he's not going to do this. So he comes to the Caliph. He says, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. What do you mean you're not going to do that? You have to do it. He says, no, I can't. He says, why? He says, look, if this project is good, it would have been done by these people thousands of years ago. Those people who have been built the pyramids and so on, they must have had a reason for that, right? And the second, it's going to destroy all the environment around. And it may not be healthy. Anyway, so he had a problem. He could have said, yeah, okay, I'll do it. and he would have become rich, he would have become close to it. But because he was so good a person and so well informed, the Hakim, the Amrullah, wanted to keep him even though he has refused. He said, you stay with me in the palace, because he wants to use him as an advisor. But because Hakim the Amrullah was a tyrant at the time, al-Hassani bin Haytham was uncomfortable. How is he going to get out of the palace? So he started imitating a mad behavior. He was, he was becoming irrational, and he makes some stupid movements. So they say he is mad. They make him and put him in a house arrest, because in Islamic law at the time, that if a person is a mad, they don't put him in prison as such, but they put him in confined, under what do they call it in modern terminology? Sorry? There isn't a word about confinement. Anyway, it's just a house arrest, and then that's how he has done a lot of his experiments and his famous books and so. Such a story for our young people is important. It says that there's a struggle, right? And when you read what he has written, and his iman and his dedication to knowledge, and his advice about that if you really want to know the truth, you have to start doubting yourself in your own opinion. When you have your opinion, you must examine first, and examine again, and do experiment if you can, to verify if you are right or not. This is why he's considered to be the father of experimental science, because he concentrated on this. Anyway, so when you talk to these people and they start, when they talk like this, they begin to agree with you. My colleagues began to agree that actually it has got a purpose. This is a good thing if we go and uncover the past, because we can use it to build the future. Right? Now, so the idea, therefore, is one of the aim is to fill this gap, to start with. Now, why is it so important to fill this gap? See, when you are brought up in the West, and you are exposed to the physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics, and all these books, and you find there is nobody contributing to the present civilization from anywhere else but Europe, what will happen to the young person, right, who has been exposed to this? Feels superiority complex. Develop a superiority, right? When we were in Manchester, did you find any name of a building of a Muslim name or Chinese name? It's all, McDonald, Paris, Maxwell, Newton. The streets are named in this way. The gardens are named in this way. Parks named in this way. Laboratories are named. Well, I'm not saying this is wrong. The problem is, by not mentioning the others and other cultures, you develop some superiority complex. Now that was a very useful method in the colonial days, because you need to have people who feel they are a special breed, and others are, by the by. And so it helps them to be commanders, to administer, to run the colony, run the empire, and so on. You cannot carry on. Now we discovered that when we were dragged into the Muslim world, because this whole work was for the West, the thing was directed to Western people, right? To tell them about, look here, it's not about 1001 Nights, it's not about Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, and the Aladdin and the magic lamp, or about the flying carpet, or about belly dancing. It's not about that. These people, they have inventions. So we named the project 1001 Inventions, not because it has 1000. Somebody says, do you actually have 1001 inventions in the Muslim world? I say, excuse me. Yeah, I said, do you think this is a lot? He said, of course. I said, hold on. The Muslim world at that time was from China to Spain. It's almost like the whole of humanity. And you think that this whole population, cannot invent one invention every year? It's just crazy. You should have millions of inventions. In fact, human beings are inventors by nature. The fact that we had to come in here on time for 2 o'clock, I had to be quite innovative to plan and do cheat the traffic and all that. Right? This is invention. Invention is about solving problems. Anyway, so we go back to this problem. When we were invited to the Muslim world, it was first when we were in London. We had this exhibition, and then one day they said, "Oh, this is Prime Minister of Turkey is passing by, and he's coming up to visit this exhibition." He was invited by the British government, by Gordon Brown, Prime Minister. He said, en route, he heard that we are somewhere in the Science Museum. Then he comes up out of protocol, and he thought they were going to be spending 5-10 minutes. He stayed with us 1.5 hours. Gordon Brown was getting, really very uncomfortable over there. Anyway, this guy comes and says, he says, "I want it in Istanbul." "Excuse me, when do you want it in Istanbul?" He says, "I want it next month in Istanbul." Because immediately we finished, it was supposed to be going to New York. And New York Hall of Science is looking at it. He said, "No, please." Okay, we managed to. When he went to Istanbul, we didn't put it in a building. It was put in a big tent.